right, let's dive right in. Today we're talking about the 17th century poet John Milton. He was a true literary giant, and he built his legacy not out of stone or marble, but out of something much, much stronger: words. So let's start with a really big question. One I think everyone thinks about at some point. How do you actually build something that lasts forever? A true monument. What does it take? Well, for John Milton, the answer was absolutely clear. It had nothing to do with physical things, with statues or tombs. For him, the only thing that could truly endure was words. And that one idea? It's the key to his entire life's work. So, where did this powerful idea even come from? Well, for Milton, it started taking shape very early in his career, when he was writing a tribute to another legend of the English language. You can see it crystallize in this early poem on Shakespeare. Milton basically says that a pile of stones is a pretty weak tribute to a genius like the bard. No, the real monument, the thing that's still alive today, is his work. All those plays and poems that still hit us centuries later. For Milton, great art is its own form of immortality. And Milton wasn't just thinking about legacy. He was obsessed with exploring the human condition itself. And he often did that by looking at its two opposing sides. Kind of like two sides of the same coin. Take these two amazing companion poems from 1631. First, you've got L'Allegro, which is Italian for the happy man. It's just a burst of joy and energy, celebrating being with people and enjoying the beauty of the world. But then you've got its twin, Il Penseroso, or the melancholy man, which finds just as much beauty in quiet, solitude, and really deep, serious thought. He's showing us that a full life needs both, right? There's wisdom and joy, but there's also wisdom and contemplation.
This whole theme gets even more dramatic a few years later in Comus. Think of it like a play. You have this villain, Comus, who's basically the personification of vice and temptation. And he tries to corrupt a virtuous young woman, but, and this is the key, she resists. Her virtue isn't just a passive quality, it's an active strength. It's a shield that evil just can't get through. It's a pretty powerful idea, all wrapped up in this beautiful poetry.
But Milton's work wasn't just stuck in these big, abstract ideas. His poetry became a way for him to process real, raw, and often painful things that were happening in his own life and in the world right outside his window. This timeline really captures that shift. Over just a couple of decades, you can watch his poetry totally transform. He goes from writing about his personal grief to engaging with these huge public events. He's turning from just a poet into a public witness. Let's break that down. It starts with this profound personal loss in Lycidas, where he's just trying to make sense of life and death after his friend drowns. Then, by 1645, he's basically announcing his arrival on the big stage with a major collection of his poems. But just 10 years after that, his voice is completely different. On the Late Massacre is pure fury. He uses this tight, controlled poem to just unleash on a brutal religious persecution, demanding justice. And all of this leads us to the final, and maybe the most profound period of Milton's life. It was a time of unbelievable personal struggle, which, paradoxically, is when he created his absolute greatest works. I mean, just imagine that for a second. What do? What is your purpose when the one tool you use to create, to define yourself, to contribute, is just taken away from you? That's the devastating reality John Milton was facing. By 1652, his eyesight was totally gone. And for a writer, a scholar whose whole life was built on reading and writing, that's a catastrophe. You can feel his crisis of faith in this incredibly personal sonnet. He's terrified that his one talent, his writing, is now useless, that he can't fulfill his purpose anymore. But then he arrives at this answer, one of the most famous lines in all of English literature. He has this profound realization that serving God isn't just about big actions or constantly creating. Sometimes it's about patience, it's about faith, it's about accepting what's happened and trusting in a bigger plan. It's just an incredible moment of spiritual strength. And you can feel this newfound strength just flooding into his later work. Look at Samson Agonistus. He's writing about the biblical hero Samson, who was blinded, imprisoned, and left to reflect on his past. I mean, it's impossible not to see the parallels with Milton's own life. The whole drama is this deep, powerful exploration of suffering, faith, and the chance for redemption, even when things seem totally hopeless. So we come full circle. Milton, despite blindness, despite political chaos, he did it. He built his monument of words.
He proved that a legacy of ideas of art can outlast any building. Which, of course, leaves us with one final thought. What will our monument be?